Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to show you how to build these simple, clean, and modern planter boxes. This is a quick and easy weekend project that requires minimal materials and tools. I've got two different sizes and I'm going to have plans for those down in the description below, so let's do it. As I mentioned, these planter boxes can be made with minimal materials. The boxes themselves will be made entirely from these cedar 1x4s. Don't worry, you're not going to need nearly this much material. I'm making a total of 4 planters, so I bought enough to cover my needs. So to start, I need to break down these boards to length using my miter saw. You can certainly do this work with a circular saw and a speed square, or heck, even with a hand saw, because this cedar is pretty easy to work with, but my miter saw has this nice stop block feature, so cutting multiple boards to the exact same length is super quick and easy. These boards are already surfaced on 3 sides, which means no milling, and it also means that they have a straight edge so you can get nice accurate cuts at the saw. And besides cedar's amazing color, it also has a great aroma. I really wish you guys could smell my shop right now. One thing you guys need to consider when you're cutting your parts is that cedar has natural variation in color. Sometimes it can be pretty dramatic. This is definitely not a bad thing, but you're going to need to think carefully about how you want to arrange your parts in your finished boxes to take advantage of that variation. Okay, with all my parts cut to length, I can move right along to assembling the sides of the box. The construction here is pretty simple. Each side consists of 4 boards. Just arrange them in the order that you think looks best and make sure that they're all facing the same direction. These cedar planks often have a milled side and a rough side. In my experience, the rough side is meant to be the show side as it has the best look. It will mean that you'll have to do a little more sanding if you want a smooth finish on the outside, or you can just leave it rough for a more rustic look. To hold the boards together, I made these 1.5-inch strips by cutting them down at the table saw. If you don't have access to a table saw, this can be done with a jigsaw or even a hand saw. Or you could just use full 1x4 strips here if you want. You're just going to need to buy a little extra material. So to position these strips, I just use one board as a spacer and then mark a line and fasten the strips to each side using screws. I'm pre-drilling these holes to avoid having the wood split on these narrow parts before I screw them into place. It's critical that I line up these strips with that line that I drew, and that's going to make sure that when I assemble the box, it's going to nest together tightly. One other detail that I added to the sides is this little chamfer to the outside edge of the boards, and I just used a trim router with a chamfer bit to do it. When the sides are assembled, it's going to give the appearance of a gap between each board, even though there won't be. This is a 100% optional step here. I just wanted to make sure that I gave these planters a little bit of visual interest. Another thing I found useful was to hold the boards in place with a clamp while they're being assembled, and this just makes the process much easier when the boards can't shift around. I also found it helped speed up the process, which is nice because I've got 16 of these sides to assemble. The long sides of the planters go together exactly the same way, but they get an extra strip in the middle, which is going to help support them and keep them from bowing out when these planters are filled up. I just marked a reference line in the center of the top and bottom of the sides, and then also in the center of the strip itself. That way I could just line up my marks and screw it home. And I thought once I got going on a few of these, this process turned out to be pretty easy. So with all my sides put together, I can go ahead and begin assembling the box. You can see here how easy these sides nest together in the corners. So it was at this point that I noticed there must have been some slight variation in the widths of the different boards, because when I went to assemble these, I noticed that some sides were slightly taller than others. This isn't a big deal as long as you assemble the box with the top facing down. That way any variation is going to be on the bottom of the box, which is ultimately just going to be hidden by the legs. To fasten the sides together, I'm using screws, and there's a couple of things to be careful of when you do this. I'm making sure to pre-drill these holes before I drive in the screws. Cedar is a soft wood, and it could split pretty easily, especially screwing this close to the edge of the board. And when I'm placing these screws, I'm making sure that I'm drilling into the support strips and not into the end grain of the outer board, which is also going to help prevent splitting. Measuring in about 1 1/8 allowed me to hit that spot. Another thing that I did here was countersink these holes, otherwise the screw heads are going to interfere with the legs when they get added. I really like using these countersink bits from Amana because they can drill your pilot hole and countersink them all in one motion, which is just going to save you time. Now I have a box with 4 sides but no bottom, so I'll take care of that next. I'm going to attach some support cleats along the bottom edge of each long side with screws.
These cleats are going to be the same width as the support strips, just a little longer, and they're going to give the bottom slats a place to rest on. Then I can just start placing the slats one by one. For the slats, I added 2 countersunk holes on each end, and I'm leaving about 3/4 inch gap between each board to allow for drainage, while the gaps on the ends and the middle support are a little bit wider just to allow for those support strips. The slats just screw into the cleats nice and easy, and the long planter boxes have 10 slats, while the little square ones have 3 slats. By the way, now would be a great time to sand, and how much you sand is entirely up to your preference. You can really sand these all the way smooth or leave them completely rough. The only thing you should definitely sand is the top edge of the boxes, just to make sure that everything's flushed up for a finished look. So right now you could call these done, and they're going to look pretty nice, but there is one additional thing that you can add here, and that's creating a nice mitered edge around the top. This just gives the planters a little more finished look while also protecting the top edge from weather. At a minimum, I would make these strips 1.5 inches, that way you cover the edge of the box as well as the support strips. But if you wanted to make them a little wider to create an overhang edge detail around the outside, I think that looks good too. I thought it was easy enough to pre-assemble these first, just using a little bit of glue and brad nails in the corners. Once those dried and were able to be moved, I attached them to the planters using glue and brad nails. Okay, so the main body of the planter is now done, and I'm going to go ahead and hit these with a little finish so that they can sit and dry while I focus on the legs.
To finish outdoor projects, there's a couple different ways you can go. The first is to try to create a bulletproof finish, which usually involves some type of epoxy or varnish. And these take forever to apply and even longer to cure, and you do all that work in vain only to have the finish fail after 2 or 3 years. See this bench as an example. And the other way is to just deal with the fact that all outdoor finishes eventually fail and focus on how easy it is to repair. With varnishes, you're going to have to sand the entire project all the way back down to bare wood and start over. But there is another way. For this project, I'm using an outdoor timber oil, which is really easy to apply. It just takes minutes, and you can brush it on, rag it on, or roll it on like I'm doing, and just wipe away the excess, and that's it. It doesn't create a film finish, so it's not going to offer as much protection, but it's just going to make it that much easier for you to go back on and wipe a new coat each year or two and move on.
So for the legs, I wanted a really modern look, and so I'm going with 2-inch angled steel. I can understand if you've never worked with steel before, this may be a little bit intimidating, but this really isn't too bad for a beginner to try. Really, the biggest obstacle here is that steel requires a special metal cutting saw, which I didn't own, but luckily a buddy of mine just down the street had one and let me borrow it to make these cuts. If that's not an option for you, you can also check your local big box store to see if you can rent one by the hour. Or if you buy this steel from a local steel supplier, there's a very good chance that they'll cut it to length for you when you make the purchase, and you can skip this step entirely. And there's also one final option, which is to skip the steel entirely and go with aluminum.
Besides being able to cut aluminum with your regular woodworking tools, you also don't have to worry about it rusting outside, unlike steel. It is going to be quite a bit more expensive than steel, and it's also not going to be as strong at the same thickness. So if I'm using 1/8 of an inch thick steel, I'd probably go with 3/16 or 1/4 inch aluminum.
So now that my legs are cut to length, I'm going to go ahead and drill holes in each leg so that I can fasten them to the planters. It's a good idea here to use a little lubricant and go slow. Okay, well, now I'm going to paint these legs with some black paint rated for outdoor use, which is just going to help protect the steel and also give the planters a super clean look. You also need to remember to clean off any of that lubricant from the steel first before you add the paint, because it's not going to stick otherwise. I use denatured alcohol to do this, but I think you could also use mineral spirits. And once the paint is dry, I can just screw them right to the planter box. The easiest way to do this is just to turn the planter box upside down, which is going to make alignment easy. And I also found these exterior screws that already have a black powder coating on them, which is going to match the legs and protect the screws from rusting. You'll also notice that I added an extra set of holes to the bottom of the legs, and that way if I ever decide to make these planter boxes taller, all I've got to do is cut an extra length of angle steel and bolt it to the bottom of the legs. I also found out that you can buy these little plastic boots that you can add to the end of the angle iron, which is just going to protect the bottom of the legs against the ground and water.
All right, guys, so when I was building this box, I made a big mistake that I knew about earlier, but I thought I was going to be able to hide it and not have to tell you about it. But it doesn't look like that's the case, so we're just going to have to throw it in the video. Come here, I'll show you. So when I was assembling this planter, I put the screws on the wrong side of the box, which was easy enough. I just popped them out and put them on the right side, thinking that I was going to be able to cover these holes when I installed the legs, but that's not even close. But that's okay, I could fix this.
To start, I need to drill out these holes. And to do that, I'm using a portable drill guide. This is a handy jig that turns your hand drill into a mini drill press. I can set the depth of cut with these stops. Then your drill connects to the top and it's go time. I can just drop the bit to line it up with my screw hole and then make the cut. Then it's rinse and repeat. Oh, and I also need to do the other side because I messed that up too. And the drill guide is not the only nifty tool I'm using. Check out this plug cutter bit, this thing's a beast. To make the plugs, I'm going to use a scrap offcut from the project, and that's going to make it at least halfway match the side of the box. This bit just zips right through it to cut all these plugs. But they aren't free yet, so I need to do that next. The cool social media way to cut these out is with a bandsaw. See, they just hop right out. The much more boring but practical way to do it is just to pop them out with a screwdriver. With a little glue in these holes, I can tap the plugs in, making sure that the grain direction of the plugs matches the side of the box. It's highly unlikely that this is going to be a perfect match, but it's going to be way better than staring at empty screw holes on the side of the planter. Once the glue dries, I can just cut them mostly flush, and then I'm going to get the rest of it with my sander. I'm not worried about sanding the area around the plug too much because I'm going to be adding finish to this anyways to cover up the plug. And I can just rub on a little finish and begin to see how well this worked. Not too bad at all on the color match, but you can tell there's a plug there. All right, we're in the home stretch now. For the inside of the planters, I'm gonna go with a 2-stage liner, which was an idea that I got from Brad at Fix This Build That. First, I'm gonna staple black plastic to the inside of the box. I'm just using some cut up lawn debris bags to do this because I noticed that the plastic was pretty heavy duty. And once that's in, I'm going to use a scratch awl to poke a bunch of holes in the plastic between the slats on the bottom. You could use a screwdriver for this or a sharp stick, whatever you have, but this is going to allow water to drain from the bottom of the box. And then to add a little bit of extra durability, I'm going to add some landscaping fabric. This is going to help hold the soil in the box, but it's also going to allow all that water to pass through it and drain away through the holes in the plastic. And the only thing I have left to do now is to fill these with potting soil and add my favorite plants or vegetables. I think these planter boxes look amazing, and not only do they provide a little extra visual interest to the outside of the porch, but like our chickens, they allow us to be a little more connected to our food sources and enjoy a fun hobby as well.